The Great Smoky Mountains stretch like an endless sea of ridges and shadows, a place where silence can feel heavier than stone. In October of 2018, a father and his teenage son ventured into those mountains for what should have been a simple 3-day camping trip. They never returned. For 5 relentless years, their disappearance gnawed at brothers, uncles, investigators, and entire crews of searchers. Men combed the forests, helicopters hovered low over the ridgelines, volunteers marched through ice and rain, but the mountains gave nothing back. Then, just as the trail of hope seemed to vanish completely, technology pierced through the wilderness. A researcher's drone swept across a valley no man had ever properly mapped. What it revealed was not just evidence, but a secret so staggering it would fracture trust, ignite anger, and finally uncover a truth that had been buried beneath the pines. If stories of mystery, survival, and discovery pull you in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with your crew. More unbelievable stories are waiting, and you won't want to miss them. The Great Smoky Mountains are both breathtaking and merciless, a place where ridges roll endlessly and valleys swallow sound itself. In October 2018, a father and his teenage son entered that wilderness for what should have been a short trip. They never returned. That Friday morning, the father clasped his brother's shoulder firmly outside a modest Knoxville home. His 16-year-old son climbed into the weathered pickup, camping gear stacked high. 3 days at Cataract Falls, the father promised. We'll return Sunday. Hours turned into days. On October 15th, as darkness crept over Knoxville, the father's older brother stared at his silent phone for the 100th time. Calls went unanswered. Worry became dread, a weight pressing against his chest. The pickup was discovered the next morning at the trailhead. Blue paint wet from mountain rain, keys still in the ignition, doors unlocked. Inside was order, nothing missing, except the father, his son, and their packed equipment. Search dogs were brought in. At first, their noses led confidently along the winding trail. For 1.5 miles, the father and son's path seemed clear. Then the animals froze, circled, whined, and lost the scent entirely. Men gathered quickly. Rangers, detectives, brothers from construction crews, uncles, cousins, neighbors. Side by side they marched, cutting through thickets and ravines. Helicopters thundered above, yet the dense canopy betrayed them, hiding what the mountains would not yield. By October 18th, the official search had sprawled across 50 square miles. From ridgelines to caves, streams to shelters, every dangerous crossing was inspected. But no footprints, no torn fabric, no broken gear appeared. The wilderness remained silent. Detective Santos, a veteran of missing person cases in the Smokies, stood at the trailhead with arms crossed. Something about this felt different. No signs of struggle, no blood, no gear, just 2 men swallowed whole. The trail register showed the father's signature, bold, steady, confident. D. Martinez plus son, 3-day backcountry Cataract Falls. A record that now seemed haunting, as though the words themselves had walked into the trees and never walked back out. Rain and even an early snow swept over the mountains that week. Tracks vanished. Streams swelled. Visibility shrank. For searchers, the Smokies were not only vast but alive, shifting against them, erasing every hint of the father and his son. Brothers and uncles refused to stand idle. They marched day after day with the rangers, combing deeper into valleys. Men with lanterns checked shelters, cliffsides, and water crossings by night, but always returned empty-handed, their faces drawn in exhaustion. Local news crews arrived, cameras catching tired men trudging through mud. "We'll find them," one uncle told reporters, voice raw but resolute. "My brother would never abandon his boy. Never. He's out there, and so is my nephew." But investigators soon uncovered troubling details. Financial records revealed debts climbing past $80,000. credit cards, loans, a second mortgage. Brothers argued bitterly in police stations. Had the father been desperate enough to disappear willingly, dragging his son with him? The boy's cousins spoke of conversations in recent weeks, talk of starting fresh somewhere new. Some believed it meant a new city, a clean slate. Others saw it differently, the first hints of a man preparing to vanish. Tension within the family deepened. Some uncles insisted the father was running, a selfish escape. Others defended him, recalling his years of guiding scouts through dangerous trails, his unmatched knowledge of the Smokies. If anyone could survive out here, it's him. By November, the mountain air had turned cruel. Nights dropped below freezing. Survival experts stated plainly, no man could last long without proper resupply. Still, brothers and uncles pressed on, tormented by the absence of any trace. On November 15th, 1 month after the disappearance, the official search was suspended. Men stood in silence at the trailhead, staring into the endless ridgelines. The mountains had swallowed father and son whole and refused to spit them back out. For those left behind, life carried on only in appearance. In truth, every sunrise and sunset carried the same unspoken question. What happened to the father and his boy? Were they lost, or had they chosen to vanish? Morning mist rolled down the ridges as men prepared once again at the trailhead. Brothers, uncles, cousins, neighbors, every man ready to push deeper into the Smokies, unwilling to abandon the missing father and son. Search dogs strained at their leashes, their handlers guiding them along rocky paths. Each man carried packs of food, radios, lanterns, and rope. Their determination seemed endless, fueled by the bond of blood and brotherhood. The father's brothers refused to rest. Each night they gathered around lanterns, voices low but firm. He wouldn't leave his boy, one said. No debt, no struggle would make him abandon his son. An uncle led a group toward the cataracts where water roared against stone. Slick rock made every step dangerous, but men pressed on. If they slipped, the water would have carried them far, he muttered grimly. Caves were inspected thoroughly. Lantern light flickered across walls, revealing nothing but bats and dust. Men emerged with hollow faces shaking their heads. No footprints, no torn fabric, no sign of 2 lives once carried here. Reporters gathered outside ranger stations, microphones aimed toward exhausted men. We've covered 50 square miles, Detective Santos explained. No tracks, no campsite, no sign of struggle. The mountains are holding their secret and we can't pry it loose. Still, volunteers arrived from nearby towns. Carpenters, mechanics, laborers, men who had never hiked these trails but refused to stand by. They carried flashlights and blankets, fanning out alongside rangers. Hope and exhaustion mingled in every step. By the second week, supplies ran thin. Some men rotated home for rest while others replaced them. But the father's brothers remained, their faces leaner, eyes red from sleepless nights. They wouldn't abandon the search. Days turned to weeks. Leads came and went. Rumors of men spotted at gas stations, blurry security footage, vague hiker sightings, each proved hollow. Hope flickered, but the father's brothers refused to let the fire die. Detectives explored the father's background more deeply: bank records, loans, conversations with coworkers. To some, it painted a man running from trouble. To his brothers, it painted a man desperate, but still devoted. The debate split them fiercely. At night, uncles argued around fires. Some cursed him for dragging his son into ruin. Others defended him. He was teaching survival, not escaping. He lived for that boy. Silence followed, truth hidden somewhere between their words. By November, nights froze harder. Men wrapped themselves in blankets, their breath visible in the beam of firelight. Search parties returned thinner each time, eyes heavy with the unspoken weight that maybe, just maybe, both were gone. On November 15th, 1 month after the disappearance, officials called off the active search. Men stood shoulder to shoulder at the trailhead, staring into endless wilderness. The silence of the mountains felt heavier than the roar of storms. As winter settled, brothers, uncles, and cousins returned home. Yet each carried the same gnawing question. What had the Smokies done with the father and his boy? The search was over, but the mystery had only begun. With the search suspended, silence replaced the sound of helicopters and boots on trails. But silence only fed suspicion. Men began asking not where the father and son had gone, but why. Detective Santos laid documents across a wooden table inside the ranger station. Brothers, uncles, and cousins leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Stacks of bills, loan agreements, second mortgages. He owed more than $80,000, Santos explained quietly. Gasps and mutters echoed. One brother slammed a fist against the table. He never told us. Another uncle shook his head slowly. He was drowning, and none of us knew. Suspicion spread like fire. Investigators revealed the father had missed work days, called in sick, asked about cashing out his pension. Co-workers said he looked distracted, tired, carrying stress on his back like an overloaded pack. His struggles were no longer secret. One cousin recalled an unsettling request weeks earlier. He told me if anything happened, to tell his boy he loved him. At the time, it seemed sentimental. Now, it sounded like a warning. Arguments erupted among the men. Some claimed the father had planned to vanish. He wanted a new life. He dragged the boy with him. Others shouted back, "No, he lived for his son. He wouldn't abandon him." Detective Santos added another troubling detail. The father held a life insurance policy worth $200,000, naming his son as beneficiary. If both were declared dead, the payout would pass into the hands of male relatives. An older uncle spat into the dirt. "Money doesn't explain this. He wasn't greedy. He was desperate." His words rang heavy, yet no man could deny the possibility that finances played a role in the disappearance. Rumors spread quickly. Men at diners whispered. Construction crews muttered on break. Maybe he ran from debts. Maybe he staged it. Maybe he thought he could hide out forever. Doubt gnawed at the community relentlessly. Yet for those who knew him best, the idea of him abandoning his son felt impossible. Brothers recalled camping trips, hiking lessons, endless afternoons spent teaching survival skills. He'd freeze to death before leaving that boy behind. Still, whispers persisted. Some neighbors reported the father talking about starting fresh. What did that mean? A new city? A hidden life? Nobody knew. But speculation was enough to fracture loyalties between men who once stood united. The boy's cousins remembered him mentioning strange comments. "Dad says we'll have new adventures." At the time, they thought it meant excitement for the trip. Now those words sounded far darker, like foreshadowing of a plan. Detectives pressed further, looking for evidence of fraud or flight. Nothing concrete appeared. No hidden bank account, no secret travel arrangements. but the absence of evidence only deepened the mystery. He could have been hiding supplies, one ranger suggested. As weeks turned into months, frustration hardened into division. Some uncles swore they'd been deceived, convinced the father staged everything. Others clung to loyalty, defending him fiercely. The debate tore through every gathering, leaving tension like static in the air. By the first winter, grief began changing shape. It wasn't just sadness over missing kin, but anger at unanswered questions. Every brother, every cousin felt betrayed, not only by the disappearance, but by the silence that followed. Detective Santos admitted the case was unlike any he had seen. It's as if the mountain swallowed them whole. But the father's choices before that, those choices raise questions we can't ignore. The men nodded solemnly. As the snow thickened, hope dimmed. Yet shadows of doubt refused to fade. Was it an accident, a crime, or a planned escape? The Smoky Mountains gave no answers, only endless silence and biting cold. The father and son remained missing, but suspicion lingered louder than absence. Brothers clashed, uncles argued, cousins doubted. The Smokies had stolen 2 lives, but doubt ensured peace would not return to those left behind. When the official search ended, the mountains seemed to close their doors. For the father's brothers and uncles, silence was unbearable. Yet life beyond the ridges demanded they carry grief everywhere. Each month, groups of men returned to the trailhead. Brothers, cousins, uncles, neighbors, they carried lanterns, ropes, and hope. They searched ravines overlooked before, valleys too steep, ridges too dangerous. Every time the mountains refused them. Year 1 was brutal. The father's older brother organized search hikes, refusing to let memory fade. Each trek ended with silence. Every night ended with the same question. Why had the Smokies kept their secret? A scholarship fund was established in the boy's name, organized by his uncles. It helped young men studying forestry and environmental science. He loved these mountains, one cousin said. Even if they took him, his name belongs here. The boy's cousins clung to loyalty, insisting both were alive. He knew survival. He taught us everything: fire, water, shelter. If anyone could endure, it's him. Their words stirred hope, though eyes betrayed growing doubt. By year 3, legal pressure mounted. Death declarations were pushed forward by insurance companies, citing dangerous conditions. The father's brothers resisted fiercely. Declaring them dead isn't closure, it's surrender, and we don't surrender. Yet time pressed harder. By year 4, exhaustion crept in. Hope flickered like dying fire. Men gathered less often, their meetings quieter, their searches fewer. The mountains seemed to mock them with indifference, ridges whispering secrets they'd never release. Even so, the father's brothers met regularly in coffee shops and kitchens. Something happened up there, one uncle always said. Accident, choice, or worse, but something. They spoke the same words so often they sounded rehearsed. When legal death was declared, a heavy silence fell across the family. Papers filed, signatures inked. To officials, the case was closed. But to brothers and cousins, it felt like betrayal stamped on paper. By the 5th year, memory had become ritual. Each October, men returned to the trailhead, lighting fires, speaking of the boy and his father. They told stories to keep the names alive, even against silence. One brother admitted quietly, "Every night I dream he walks out of those trees, beard grown, boy taller. They look at us wondering why we stopped believing." His voice cracked and silence followed. The Smoky Mountains stood unchanged, ridges, rivers, forests, indifferent. For men who once marched daily, all that remained were scars of waiting. They carried grief like packs too heavy to ever set down. And yet, beneath weariness, something stirred, a whisper of possibility, a suspicion the story wasn't over. "The mountains hide men," one ranger said, "but secrets don't last forever." The brothers clung to that fragile hope. For 5 long years, life moved forward on the surface. But beneath, every brother, every uncle, every cousin carried the same haunting silence. The weight had become their existence, until a machine in the sky changed everything. 5 years after the disappearance, most men had resigned to silence. Then came a breakthrough, not from boots on trails, but from technology in the hands of a determined researcher surveying remote wilderness. Dr. Chen, a graduate student studying black bear populations, launched his drone from a remote ridge northeast of Cataract Falls. His work wasn't meant to solve mysteries, just track wildlife. Yet fate had other plans. The drone buzzed over ravines carved by centuries of water, over ridges so steep they remained untouched by hikers. At first, Chen's monitor showed only endless canopy. Then something unnatural broke the pattern of green. He leaned closer. Shapes. Rectangular, sharp, geometric, half buried beneath vines and leaves. Not boulders, not trees. Man-made. "What is that?" Chen muttered. He adjusted the camera, heart pounding, realizing these forms had no place in wilderness this remote. Chen radioed park rangers immediately. Coordinates were relayed. "You need a team here now," he urged. "This isn't natural. Someone built something." The urgency in his voice stirred long-dormant hope among men who remembered the case. 2 days later, rangers and recovery specialists rappelled into the valley. Sweat poured as ropes slid against stone, boots scraping sheer walls. The air was damp, heavy, filled with anticipation of discovery no one dared predict. At the bottom, they found it, a carefully constructed campsite, a lean-to reinforced with stone and branches, a fire pit circled by rocks, food containers hung high in trees, safe from predators. Around the camp, scattered gear matched descriptions given years earlier by the boys' uncles: pots, rope, packs. The site wasn't temporary. It was built for months, maybe longer. The men's suspicions turned into stunned silence. One ranger whispered into his radio, "It's them! We found their camp!" The valley echoed faintly, as if the Smokies themselves finally acknowledged the presence of the missing father and son after half a decade. But where were they? The camp was empty, silent, a ghost of effort and survival. Searchers fanned out cautiously, eyes scanning for bones, for signs of life, for anything that would finally close the story. Beneath a camouflaged tarp, weighted by stones, they found something chilling: a weathered leather-bound journal. It was heavy with ink and sorrow, written in the father's hand. Dates stretched from October 2018 to March 2019. The first entry froze every man who read it. October 13th, 2018, we're not going home. Debt worse than anyone knows. Jail looming. This is the only way. I won't leave my son alone. The father had planned it. Supplies stashed weeks ahead, gear hidden in the valley, a desperate escape from debt and consequences, not a tragic accident. Each word on the page shattered old beliefs. Entries told of survival, hunting small game, purifying water, fortifying shelter. The boy's skills shone, crafting tools, repairing gear. "He builds better than me," one entry read. "He keeps me alive. He is becoming a man." But darker notes emerged. The boy grew restless, asked about home constantly. "He called me selfish," one entry confessed. "He's right, but I can't face prison. I can't lose him. This is all I know." Then came the March entries. One described disaster: the boy falling from a cliff while gathering firewood, rope snapping, body broken. The father wrote of cradling him through the night, his son whispering final words of love. The last entry, dated March 20th, carried finality. "He's gone." I buried him where the mountains stretch forever. I can't live without him. I'm joining him. Forgive me, brothers. The pages ended in smudged ink. Rangers followed the journal's clues. On a ridge, they found a stone cairn. Inside lay the boy's remains, carefully placed to overlook the valley. Not far away, at the base of a cliff, lay his father. The discovery shocked every man involved. 2 lives hidden in wilderness, surviving 5 months before tragedy struck. Not lost, not murdered, but consumed by desperation, choices, and the unforgiving weight of the mountains themselves. Word spread quickly. Brothers, uncles, cousins, all gathered in stunned silence. For 5 years they had clung to hope or suspicion. Now they faced the truth, written in the father's own hand. The wait was over. Inside the ranger station, men gathered around the weathered journal, its cracked leather binding holding the father's final words. Brothers, uncles, cousins, detectives, all leaned close, eyes heavy with anticipation and dread. Detective Santos opened the journal carefully. First entry, October 13th, 2018. His voice dropped. Jake doesn't know yet, but we're not going home. Debt's worse than anyone realizes. Jail looms. This is the only way. Shock rippled across the room. One uncle clenched his fists. Another brother muttered, "He planned this." The realization tore open wounds. The father hadn't been swallowed by the mountains. He had led his boy deliberately into them. The entries described weeks of preparation. The father had hidden supplies in the valley, food, water purification, winter gear. 3 weeks of planning, Santos read aloud. He studied off-grid survival, stashed gear, and lied to us all. At first, the boy believed it was simply a longer camping trip. He laughed, built fires, explored the wilderness. But suspicion soon grew. By October 20th, the father confessed the truth. His son was furious. "He called me selfish," the father wrote. "And he's right. But prison means leaving him alone. I chose this path. He'll understand eventually." His words bled desperation, as if convincing himself more than his boy. Weeks passed. The journal revealed adaptation. The boy built water collectors, stronger shelters, even tools. "He's better at this than me," the father admitted. "Every day he grows stronger. He talks of home, but he endures." The entries captured glimpses of bond and survival. November the 2nd. He asked about his uncles. "I told him they search for us. He wants to signal them. I told him, not yet. We're not ready." By December, hope and despair mingled. December 25th. "He gave me a gift made of pine and bark. He misses home, but he smiles. He's becoming a man in front of my eyes." The boy's strength inspired his father, but cracks deepened. February 10th. "Helicopters circled today. He wanted to signal. I refused. He doubts me now." The words painted conflict, trust fading, survival heavy with questions. Then came March. The tone shifted violently. March 15th. "Everything ruined. He fell from a cliff while gathering wood. Rope snapped. Injuries severe. No way to seek help without exposing everything. I fear he won't last." March 16th. "He died at sunrise. I held him all night. His last words, 'Tell my uncles I love them.' I buried him overlooking the mountains he loved. My soul is broken." March 20th. "This is my last entry to my brothers. Forgive me. I loved him more than life itself, but my choices destroyed him. I'm going to join him now. I'm sorry." The men in the room were silent. The journal's words left no doubt. Survival had been possible, but tragedy had ended it. Anger, sorrow, and fractured understanding rippled through every brother and uncle. One cousin spoke through tears. He wasn't evil. He was desperate. He thought hiding would save him, but it destroyed them both. His words trembled, echoing what many felt but few could voice. Investigators confirmed the journal aligned with evidence. The camp matched supply lists. The cairn matched burial descriptions. The cliff matched the father's final decision. Truth had finally surfaced, not through discovery, but through his own words. The journal passed from hand to hand, pages trembling in calloused fingers. Each man carried a different weight: betrayal, anger, grief. But all agreed. The father's words were now part of their story forever. For 5 years, silence haunted the Smokies. Now, ink had broken that silence. The journal revealed not only survival, but the cost of despair. The mountains kept secrets, but paper told the truth. The journal's final words guided recovery teams to the exact places described. Every man who read them knew this part would be the hardest, confirming the fates of the missing father and son. Guided by rangers, the team ascended a ridge overlooking the valley. There, beneath a carefully arranged cairn of stone, they uncovered the boy's remains. He had been buried with precision, as though love carved every placement. A cousin knelt, voice shaking. He wanted his boy to see the mountains forever. Silence fell across the men. Even in despair, the father had tried to give his son a final resting place of dignity. Farther away, at the base of a 200-foot cliff, they found the father's body. Bones confirmed what the journal had already revealed. He had chosen death days after losing his son. The evidence was undeniable. The coroner's report confirmed timelines. The boy had died mid-March from traumatic injuries. The father survived 4 days, then leapt to his death. Survival had lasted 5 months. Yet grief had ended everything. For the father's brothers, grief deepened into something unexplainable. "He loved that boy," one uncle said, tears streaming. "But love twisted by desperation becomes tragedy." His words captured what every man felt, but struggled to express. Detective Santos addressed them plainly. The boy's death was accidental. The father's death was suicide. Both survived longer than anyone believed possible, but choice and consequence shaped the outcome. The Smokies didn't kill them. Circumstances did. News spread quickly. Men across Knoxville gathered in shock. Some called the father a coward, others a desperate man who broke under weight too heavy. Heated debates filled barbershops, diners, and construction sites across the city. Brothers clashed publicly. "He endangered his son," one cousin argued. Another snapped back. "He fought to keep him alive for 5 months. That takes devotion." The community fractured, each man interpreting the story differently. Journalists reported the discovery with solemn voices. Headlines captured the duality: survival and tragedy, devotion and desperation. For many men, it felt less like closure and more like another wound carved open. An older uncle shook his head. "I'll never forgive him." Yet another countered. "I will. Not because it was right, but because he was one of us. He was broken, not heartless." The boy's cousins remembered his laughter, his energy, his eagerness to learn. "He deserved more than this," one said, "but he carried himself with strength until the end. He became a man in those mountains." Investigators closed the case officially, but questions lingered. Could the tragedy have been prevented? Could debt, despair, and pressure have been eased if the father had turned to his brothers instead of vanishing into wilderness? A counselor specializing in men's crises weighed in. He believed disappearing was the only way. He felt trapped, but choices made in isolation led to destruction. Support networks could have changed this outcome. The revelation weighed on every man involved. Each asked himself, what could I have done differently? Could a conversation, a loan, a word of encouragement have kept him from that desperate path? As October returned, exactly 5 years later, men gathered once more, this time not for searching, but for burial. Father and son were laid together, graves side by side, the wait finally over. Hundreds of men attended. Brothers, cousins, rangers, hikers, co-workers. Lanterns lined the graveside as voices broke with grief. He wasn't evil, one brother said. He was desperate. His love was real, even if his choices destroyed him. The tragedy unveiled more than survival. It unveiled the fragile nature of men under crushing burdens. The mountains had not simply swallowed two lives, they had revealed how despair can fracture even the strongest of fathers. On a cold October morning in 2023, exactly 5 years after the disappearance, men gathered in Knoxville's Highland Memorial Cemetery. Father and son were finally buried together, their separation ended. Lanterns flickered softly among grieving brothers. The funeral drew hundreds, rangers who searched tirelessly, classmates who once hiked with the boy, co-workers from construction sites, and countless men who followed the mystery. Every face carried sorrow, but also the weight of unfinished questions. One of the father's older brothers delivered the eulogy. His voice cracked as he spoke. He taught his boy to love the outdoors, to endure hardship, to be strong. That part of him cannot be erased. The men wept openly. Strength didn't mean silence that day. Tears carved lines across calloused faces. For many, the ceremony wasn't only about farewell, it was about finding peace after years of silence, doubt, and anger. In the months following, the boys' uncles established a memorial fund. It provided emergency assistance to men struggling under debt, legal pressures, and despair, the very pressures that had broken their brother and led to tragedy. The fund saved homes, kept fathers with their sons, and reminded struggling men that help existed. If he had reached out, one cousin said quietly, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe we could have carried it with him. For Detective Santos, the case became a lesson in vulnerability. He spoke at gatherings of men, urging them to seek help before desperation took hold. Silence isolates. Speak. Lean on your brothers. Don't carry burdens alone. The community learned something deeper. Men began talking more openly about struggle. Brothers checked in with brothers, uncles with nephews, cousins with cousins. Slowly, the silence that once haunted them gave way to conversations. Still, forgiveness was not universal. Some men held bitterness, believing the father's choices unforgivable. He dragged his boy into despair, one uncle said firmly. Yet others answered, he loved his son. His mistake was believing isolation was strength. By year's end, the gravesite had become a place of pilgrimage. Men traveled miles to stand before the headstones. They left carved walking sticks, lanterns, survival knives, tokens of respect for endurance and cautionary reminder of choices. The Smoky Mountains, once a symbol of silence and loss, became a place of remembrance. Each October, men hiked Cataract Falls in tribute. Boots on trails echoed with reverence, memory, and lessons carried forward. The boy's cousins often spoke of his legacy. He became a man in those mountains, one said. Even facing despair, he built, endured, and gave strength. That memory belongs to us, not the wilderness. For the father's brothers, forgiveness remained personal. Some chose it, others rejected it. But all agreed the tragedy had taught them something. No man survives by carrying burdens alone. Brotherhood exists for sharing weight. Rangers carved a small plaque at the trailhead, in memory of 2 lives lost and the men who searched without rest. May these mountains remind us of both strength and fragility. The plaque became a quiet symbol. Hikers touched it before entering the trails, as though promising to remember. For the father and son, remembrance lived not just in stories, but in every man who carried their lesson. Years later, men still debated the father's choices. Was he selfish? Was he broken? Was he both? The Smokies offered no answers. They only stood as witness to decisions made in desperation. But brothers, uncles, and cousins had found something more important than certainty: understanding. They turned tragedy into purpose, silence into dialogue, grief into action. The legacy was not only loss, it was transformation. And so, the mountains kept their secret for 5 years, but in the end revealed something greater: the resilience of men bound by blood, loyalty, and memory. a legacy carved not in stone, but in brotherhood.